The rain poured down like needles from the charcoal sky, a relentless storm that seemed determined to drown the bustling city below. But nothing, not even nature's fury, could dampen Lisa Hargrove's spirit as she stepped out of her sleek black car and walked briskly toward the towering structure of Brentwick National Bank. The entrance loomed before her, all shimmering glass and chrome, projecting wealth and power. Lisa adjusted her sleeveless ivory blouse, straightened her blazer, and took a steadying breath. Today wasn't supposed to be complicated. Just a simple withdrawal of $50,000 from her business account to fund an urgent investment. She had no reason to suspect that anything would go wrong. After all, Hargrove Capital Solutions had been a loyal customer of this bank for years. Millions of dollars had flowed through their accounts, a river of capital that had always been treated with respect. But even as she entered the bank's grand lobby, something in the air felt wrong. The bank was only moderately busy. Customers sat in polished leather chairs waiting their turn, while a handful of tellers stood behind their counters, eyes glazed with boredom. Lisa's heels clicked sharply against the marble floor, each step measured and confident. She made her way toward the counter where a woman in her mid-50s with sharp, cold eyes and rigid posture looked up. The nameplate read Ms. Caldwell. Lisa could tell from the woman's demeanor that courtesy was not her strong suit. "How can I help you today?" Ms. Caldwell's voice was flat, her smile tight-lipped and strained, as if politeness itself was an inconvenience. Lisa placed her gold-embossed debit card and ID on the counter. "I need to make a withdrawal. $50,000 in cash. From my business account." For a moment, Ms. Caldwell simply stared. Her fingers hovered uncertainly over the keyboard before she even glanced at the card and ID. It was as if the very request itself had short-circuited her brain. When her gaze returned to Lisa, her eyebrows were pinched with suspicion. $50,000 in cash. The words left her mouth with an incredulous tone, as if Lisa had asked for a barrel of gold bricks instead of a routine transaction. "Yes, from my business account, Hargrove Capital Solutions," Lisa replied, keeping her voice steady and polite, though her patience was already starting to wear thin. She'd dealt with this sort of thing before, people underestimating her, questioning her authority. But today, she didn't have time for it. "One moment, please." Ms. Caldwell's smile faded into a frown as she began typing, her nails clicking against the keys with a mechanical precision. Lisa glanced around the lobby, her mind already running through the next few hours of her day. Calls to make, documents to sign, an entire investment strategy to finalize. The $50,000 was critical, but she'd be lying if she said it was irreplaceable. It was a mere drop in the ocean compared to what she managed daily. Yet here she was, waiting as if she were some penniless college student trying to cash a bounced check. After what felt like an eternity, Ms. Caldwell looked up from her computer screen, her expression unreadable. "I'm afraid we're going to need to verify some details before proceeding with your request." Lisa's eyes narrowed. "Verify? I've made withdrawals of this size before without any issues. I've been a client here for years." "Yes. Well, security protocols have recently been tightened." The lie dripped from Ms. Caldwell's lips as smoothly as oil. "I'll need to speak with my manager. Please wait here." Without another word, the woman turned and walked briskly away, her heels clicking with unnecessary force against the polished floor. Lisa folded her arms, her fingers drumming lightly against her elbow. Something was definitely off. She'd made larger withdrawals before, with nothing more than a signature and a polite thank you. This felt different, more like an interrogation than a transaction. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Lisa's irritation was building. She could practically feel her blood pressure rising, each moment of delay a reminder that she was being disrespected in the very place that had profited so much from her business. When Ms. Caldwell finally returned, she wasn't alone. Beside her stood a man in his early 40s, his neatly tailored suit and slicked back hair practically screaming corporate elitism. His smile was wider than Miss Caldwell's, but just as insincere. "Ms. Hargrove, I'm Paul Givens, the branch manager. I understand you're trying to make a rather substantial withdrawal today." His tone was patronizing, as if she were a child asking for candy before dinner. "That's right. $50,000. And if your teller had done her job properly, I would have been out of here 10 minutes ago." Lisa's voice was calm, but laced with steel. Mr. Givens' smile faltered, but he quickly recovered. "You see, Ms. Hargrove, we have certain procedures we must follow when a transaction of this magnitude is requested. I'm sure you understand." Lisa held his gaze, refusing to let him intimidate her. "What I understand is that you're wasting my time. My accounts with this bank are more than sufficient to cover the withdrawal. I'm not asking for a loan. I'm requesting my own money." "Yes, of course," Mr. Givens replied, his false cheerfulness starting to crack. "It's just that we must confirm the purpose of the withdrawal and ensure it's not part of any suspicious activity." The implication hit Lisa like a slap to the face. Suspicious activity. Was he actually suggesting she was involved in something illegal? "I have a meeting in less than an hour, Mr. Givens," Lisa said slowly, her voice like ice. "I would appreciate it if you would do your job and release my funds now." He cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. "I'm afraid we'll need further verification. Perhaps if you could provide some additional identification or documents." "That's ridiculous. My ID and business card are right in front of you. You have my account on file. I'm simply following protocol, Ms. Hargrove. Perhaps if you were to return at a later time, when we've had more opportunity to assess the situation." Lisa couldn't believe what she was hearing. It was pure stonewalling, an insult dressed up as policy. And she'd had enough. She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone, her fingers moving with a sharp, determined purpose. "If that's how you want to play this, Mr. Givens, then I hope you're prepared for the consequences. Because this," she gestured at the counter between them, "this is unacceptable." And with that, Lisa dialed the number of the one person who could make the whole bank wish they'd never dared to disrespect her. The phone pressed against Lisa's ear rang once, twice, 3 times before a familiar, confident voice answered on the other end. "Hey Lisa, everything all right?" "Not exactly, Malcolm. I'm at Brentwick National Bank, and they're refusing to release my own money. $50,000. I've been here nearly half an hour, and their so-called protocols keep changing by the minute." Malcolm Stone's sigh was immediate, heavy with understanding. As Lisa's trusted legal advisor and a man with more power in his contacts list than most senators, he knew the implications. "You're being profiled. I'll handle it." "Good, because I'm about 5 seconds away from making a scene. I'll call you back in 3 minutes. Sit tight." Lisa ended the call and slid her phone back into her purse, her gaze locked on Paul Givens, who was now pretending to type something important on his computer. Ms. Caldwell lingered nearby, eyes darting between Lisa and her manager with the anxiety of someone who knew the situation was spiraling out of control. "Is there a problem, Ms. Hargrove?" Mr. Givens asked, his condescending smile back in place. Lisa leaned forward, her eyes narrowed. "The problem, Mr. Givens, is that you're deliberately withholding my money. The problem is that you've insulted me by implying I'm involved in some kind of criminal activity. The problem is that you're either so incompetent at your job or so arrogant that you think you can get away with this. Ms. Hargrove, please understand. I understand just fine, and so will the board of directors once they hear about this." A flicker of panic crossed his face, but before he could respond, Lisa's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. Malcolm's number. She answered instantly. "It's done," Malcolm said, his voice smooth and reassuring. "You should be getting an apology within the next 60 seconds. But Lisa, if you want my advice, pull all your money from that bank. Today. I'm considering it. Thanks, Malcolm." "Anytime." Lisa ended the call and looked up, her eyes blazing with a quiet fury that made Mr. Givens visibly shrink. "Something wrong, Ms. Hargrove. His voice quivered slightly, the earlier arrogance leaking away like air from a punctured tire. "You tell me," Lisa replied, folding her arms across her chest. She didn't bother to hide the contempt in her gaze. As if on cue, the door to the manager's office swung open, and a man in an immaculate gray suit stormed out, his expression one of pure panic. Lisa recognized him immediately. Arthur Danvers, the regional director. The man whose signature had been on every major correspondence between her company and the bank. "Ms. Hargrove." Danvers rushed forward, his hand extended, his face as pale as milk. "I am terribly sorry for this inconvenience. I assure you, this is all a huge misunderstanding." "Funny how misunderstandings only seem to happen when it comes to people who look like me," Lisa replied coolly. "But go on, Mr. Danvers. Enlighten me." The man's forehead glistened with sweat. "Our policies are meant to protect our clients' assets, but clearly there has been a gross error in judgment here. Rest assured, the matter will be rectified immediately." Mr. Givens opened his mouth to speak, but Danvers shot him a glare so lethal that the man's words died in his throat. Lisa didn't look away. "I asked for $50,000, Mr. Danvers. It's a simple transaction. My identification and account information have already been provided, and yet I've been made to feel like a criminal for daring to request my own money. You're absolutely right, and I cannot express how sorry I am. We deeply value your business, Ms. Hargrove. I will personally ensure your transaction is completed within the next few minutes. In fact, please, come with me to my office where we can handle this matter privately and with the utmost respect." Lisa's eyes shifted to Mr. Givens, whose face had turned an unattractive shade of crimson. Then to Ms. Caldwell, who suddenly found her shoes far more interesting than anything else in the room. "No," Lisa said, her voice firm. "You'll handle the transaction right here, at this counter. Because that's where it should have been handled in the first place." Danvers swallowed hard, his desperation palpable. "Of course. Right away." He gestured frantically at Mr. Givens, who stumbled over himself to access the account and initiate the withdrawal. The entire process took less than 5 minutes, 5 minutes that would have been avoided had she been shown the most basic level of respect. Lisa watched the clumsy attempt at damage control with a mixture of amusement and fury. When the neatly bundled cash was finally handed over to her, Mr. Givens mumbled something that might have been an apology. She took the money, but made no effort to hide her disgust. "Thank you," Lisa said, her tone laced with sarcasm. "Now I'd like a printout of my entire account history for the last year. I have some decisions to make." Danvers nodded so quickly his head seemed ready to fall off. "Of course, Ms. Hargrove. We'll have that printed for you immediately." Lisa glanced at the terrified manager and his groveling superior. "And when I leave here today, you can expect a formal complaint from my lawyer. This kind of treatment is unacceptable, and I will not tolerate it." Danvers stammered something that sounded like an apology, but Lisa had already turned her attention away. She waited another 10 minutes for the paperwork to be prepared, and when it was finally handed to her, she didn't even bother to check it. She simply tucked it away and walked toward the exit, her heels clicking with a purpose that sent chills down the spine of everyone who heard them. But she wasn't finished, not by a long shot. As Lisa pushed through the glass doors and into the rain-soaked street, she was already formulating her next move. The rain pounded relentlessly against the city, a heavy curtain of water drenching everything in sight. But Lisa barely noticed as she marched toward her car, her mind a whirlwind of rage, disappointment, and determination. Her fingers gripped the leather strap of her purse so tightly her knuckles turned white. How many times had she been through this? How many times had her credibility, her identity, her very right to exist and succeed been questioned simply because she was a black woman? It was exhausting, infuriating, and sadly predictable. She slid into the driver's seat of her sleek black Mercedes, the car's comforting luxury doing little to calm her. The silence within the vehicle felt almost oppressive as she stared through the windshield, eyes unfocused, her chest heaving from a fury she could barely contain. Lisa reached for her phone, her thumb hovering over Malcolm's number before she pulled her hand back. No, not yet. Not until she was ready to tear down everything Brentwick National Bank had built. Instead, she dialed another number, one she rarely used but kept saved for emergencies. After 3 rings, the call was answered by a warm, confident voice. Lisa Hargrove. To what do I owe the pleasure? Rachel, I need a favor. Rachel Whitmore was the founder of Watchdog Legal, a civil rights organization specializing in discrimination cases against major corporations. They had taken down powerful institutions before, and Lisa knew Rachel's passion for justice matched her own. I'm listening, Rachel replied, her tone shifting from friendly to focused in an instant. Lisa recounted everything that had transpired at the bank, her words precise, cutting, laced with a controlled fury that made Rachel's silence on the other end feel like anticipation before a storm. Typical, Rachel said at last, her voice low and furious. And you said this happened at Brentwick National? Yes, and I want to make sure it never happens to anyone else again, but I need to hit them where it hurts. You're talking about more than just a lawsuit, aren't you? Much more, Lisa confirmed. I want their practices exposed. I want the world to see exactly how they treat their high-profile clients, especially those who don't fit their neat little picture of wealth and power. Rachel let out a slow, appreciative whistle. You know, I've been wanting to go after Brentwick National for years. You just gave me the ammunition I needed. Good. Let me know what you need from me to make this happen. And in the meantime, I have a few other cards to play. I like the sound of that. I'll start assembling a team right away. This is going to be big, Lisa. Real big. I'm counting on it. After ending the call, Lisa's fingers drummed restlessly against the steering wheel. This wasn't just about getting her money anymore. It was about principle, about power, about proving to herself and everyone else that she wouldn't allow herself to be demeaned or silenced. Her next call was to her assistant, Vanessa. Vanessa, I need you to prepare a press release, Lisa said without preamble. I want it drafted and ready to be distributed by tomorrow morning, and have a meeting arranged with our PR team this afternoon. Of course, Lisa. What's this about? Vanessa's voice was calm and efficient, her loyalty to Lisa unquestionable. Brentwick National Bank just made the worst mistake of their lives, and I'm about to make sure everyone knows it. Understood. I'll get right on it. Lisa ended the call and allowed herself a moment of silence, her breathing steadying as her plan took shape. A single calculated act of disrespect was about to cost the bank far more than $50,000. Her phone chimed, signaling a message from Malcolm. All handled. They're expecting a formal complaint, but I'm guessing you're going bigger than that. Let me know how I can help. Lisa's lips twitched into a smile. Malcolm knew her too well. Before she even pulled out of the parking lot, her phone was ringing again. This time, it was Arthur Danvers, the regional director who had scrambled so desperately to appease her earlier. She let it ring for a few moments, enjoying the power of control before finally answering. Ms. Hargrove, Danvers stammered, his voice practically trembling. I wanted to reach out personally to express my sincerest apologies for what happened today. I assure you, this is not how we conduct business at Brentwick National Bank. Is that so? Lisa replied coolly. Because from where I was standing, it looked like a pattern, but deeply ingrained one. There will be disciplinary action taken against the staff members involved, Danvers rushed to add. And of course, we will make sure nothing like this ever happens again. That's not enough. There was a beat of silence. Excuse me. You heard me. A few scoldings and empty promises aren't going to fix this. What I experienced today was a direct result of your bank's culture, your policies, and I'm going to make sure the world knows exactly what you stand for. Ms. Hargrove, please, I assure you, we will do everything in our power to make this right. Perhaps we could discuss this over dinner, on me, of course. I would be happy to offer our deepest apologies and discuss a mutually beneficial resolution." Lisa's laugh was cold and cutting. "Dinner? Are you serious, Mr. Danvers? The only thing I want from you is a public apology and a complete overhaul of your bank's discriminatory practices. Anything less, and you'll be seeing my face on every news channel in the country." Danvers' sharp intake of breath was satisfying, but Lisa didn't wait for him to sputter out another excuse. She ended the call and tossed her phone onto the passenger seat. Lisa Hargrove had spent her entire life fighting to be seen, to be respected, to be heard. And she had no intention of letting a petty banker's prejudice diminish her worth. The world was about to learn what happened when you tried to silence someone who had built herself from the ground up. And Brentwick National Bank would regret ever mistaking her calm for weakness. Lisa didn't sleep much that night. Her mind was a battlefield of strategies, each more aggressive than the last. By the time dawn broke, she had already outlined her plan in detail, her laptop screen glowing with the harsh white light of a dozen open documents. Emails were sent, calls were made, and before she even took a sip of her morning coffee, Vanessa had already responded with a polished press release ready to detonate the scandal. But Lisa wasn't just relying on the media. She had her own arsenal of connections, people who owed her favors, and others who were more than willing to join her cause for the sheer satisfaction of bringing down a corrupt institution. Her phone buzzed with an incoming call. Rachel's name flashed on the screen. "Morning, Rachel," Lisa answered, her voice crisp and focused. "You've officially set off a firestorm," Rachel said, the delight in her voice unmistakable. "I've got my best attorneys drafting the lawsuit as we speak. This isn't just about your treatment. We're going after them for their entire discriminatory framework. I've already reached out to other clients who faced the same bias. This is going to be huge. Perfect. I want them to pay for what they've done. Not just to me, but to everyone they've belittled and dismissed over the years. Oh, they will. Trust me." The call ended, but Lisa's work was far from over. She drove to her office, her fingers dancing across the steering wheel as her thoughts raced. The city skyline loomed ahead, but all she could see was the target she intended to bring down. Her assistant greeted her with a stack of documents and a determined expression. "Everything's ready, Lisa. I've already reached out to our PR team and made sure the press release is being circulated. It's getting attention. Good. But I need more than attention. I need outrage. I need the public to feel what I felt when I stood there and was told I wasn't good enough to access my own money." Vanessa's eyes shone with admiration. "You've got this. Everyone's on board, and I'd never seen you more prepared." Lisa nodded, her eyes sharp and focused. "Send the press release to every news outlet, and I want the social media team to push it hard. Hashtags, trending topics, influencers, everything. I'll get it done." Vanessa disappeared from her office, her efficiency nothing short of miraculous. Lisa stared at her computer screen, her fingers tracing invisible lines on her desk as she waited. But she didn't have to wait long. By noon, the news had already begun to spread. Brentwick National Bank was being accused of systemic discrimination, with Lisa Hargrove's personal experience serving as the catalyst for what was quickly being dubbed #ExcessDenid. The hashtag trended within hours, comments pouring in from people who had experienced similar situations. Stories of denied loans, unjustified account freezes, and biased treatment filled the internet like wildfire. The narrative wasn't just about Lisa anymore. It was about everyone who had ever been made to feel less than because of their skin color, gender, or status. Lisa's phone buzzed constantly with notifications. Allies reaching out. Media outlets begging for interviews. Competitors in the banking industry offering statements of sympathy, while subtly promoting their own inclusive policies. But the most satisfying messages came from Brentwick National Bank itself. A trembling apology email from Arthur Danvers arrived first, his words clumsy and desperate. He pleaded for a private meeting to discuss appropriate reparations and improved protocols. Lisa deleted the email without hesitation. Then came the official response from Brenwick's CEO, Mark Caldwell. His letter was polished, the kind of apology meant to placate rather than acknowledge genuine wrongdoing. Ms. Hargrove, we deeply regret the unfortunate incident that occurred at our establishment. It is not reflective of our institution's values, and we are committed to addressing the issue promptly. Lisa read the words, her lips curling into a bitter smile. A blanket apology crafted by a team of lawyers and PR experts. Not a shred of genuine remorse. But they were scared. She could feel it. The final email that caught her attention was marked URGNT and came directly from Mark Caldwell himself. The tone was different. Personal. Ms. Hargrove, I would like to extend my deepest and most sincere apologies. I assure you, this incident is being handled with the utmost seriousness. I would appreciate the opportunity to meet with you personally and discuss how we can remedy this unacceptable situation. Please, name your time and place. Lisa stared at the message, her fingers tapping rhythmically against the desk. Caldwell's desperation was practically seeping through the screen. He wasn't just worried about the lawsuit. He was worried about the company's reputation, its stock prices, its image. And Lisa held all the power. The meeting would happen, but not on his terms. She drafted a quick response, her words precise and commanding. I will meet with you at Brenwick National Bank's headquarters, in your office, tomorrow at noon. I expect transparency, accountability, and a genuine plan to address the discrimination within your institution. Anything less, and I will proceed with the lawsuit and ensure the public is made fully aware of your so-called values. Lisa hit send, her chest rising and falling as if she had just run a marathon. But the exhilaration wasn't exhaustion. It was power. True, undeniable power. She looked out of her office window, the city stretching before her like a chessboard waiting to be conquered. The rules of the game had changed. And this time, she was playing to win. Lisa arrived at Brenwick National Bank's headquarters at precisely noon the next day, her heels clicking against the polished marble floors with a confidence that drew stares from employees and visitors alike. She wore a charcoal gray tailored suit that exuded power and professionalism, her hair swept back into a sleek bun that framed her resolute expression. The receptionist's eyes widened when she recognized her. There was a brief moment of hesitation before she forced a smile. Good afternoon, Ms. Hargrove. Mr. Caldwell is expecting you. His office is on the top floor. Thank you, Lisa replied crisply, her gaze not lingering for a moment. She stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the executive suite. The ride-up was smooth, but her mind was a whirlwind of preparation. Today wasn't just about confronting a powerful man. It was about confronting an entire system that had grown comfortable in its prejudice. The doors opened, revealing a lavish reception area adorned with expensive art pieces and gleaming fixtures. Mark Caldwell's secretary stood the moment she saw Lisa, her expression somewhere between anxious and overly polite. Ms. Hargrove, Mr. Caldwell is waiting for you. Right this way. Lisa followed her into a sprawling corner office bathed in natural light. Mark Caldwell stood as she entered, his carefully crafted charm splintered by the anxiety etched into his features. He was tall and fit, dressed in an expensive suit that seemed to act as his only shield. Ms. Hargrove, he said, forcing a smile. Thank you for coming. Please, have a seat. Lisa didn't move. I'll stand, thank you. This won't take long. Mark cleared his throat, his gaze flickering to the empty chair before snapping back to her. I want to personally apologize for what happened at our branch. The incident was unacceptable and... No. Lisa's voice cut through his rehearsed speech like a blade. I'm not here for your apology. I'm here for accountability. Do you even know what happened, Mr. Caldwell? Or were you just told to clean up the mess and save face? His jaw tightened. I've been fully briefed on the incident, and I assure you, we're taking this very seriously. Seriously enough to issue a canned apology and throw a settlement my way. Lisa shot back, her eyes blazing. You're only here because my name has power. But what about the people who've been turned away from your branches without the privilege of media attention? What about the countless individuals your employees have made feel like they don't belong? Mark's composure wavered. We have procedures in place to prevent discrimination. Clearly, those procedures failed in this case. We're working on making changes, real changes, to our policies and training. Words. Lisa folded her arms, her gaze icy. Prove it. Show me exactly what you're doing to change the way your bank treats people who don't fit your mold of an acceptable customer. Mark hesitated, his hands clasped in front of him. We've already started implementing new training protocols. Mandatory sensitivity training for all employees, as well as a thorough review of our current policies. We're also launching an independent audit to ensure fairness in all our operations. Lisa arched an eyebrow. And who's conducting this audit? Someone you hired to produce the results you want. It's a third-party firm with no ties to our bank, he said quickly, his desperation evident. We want transparency. We need it if we're going to rebuild our credibility. Rebuilding your credibility is the least of your concerns, Lisa replied. Your concern should be rebuilding the trust you've shattered, not just with me, but with every person who's been dismissed, degraded and disregarded by your so-called procedures. Mark ran a hand through his hair, his shoulders sagging under the weight of her words. You're right, and we've been wrong. I want to work with you, Ms. Hargrove. You're clearly a woman of influence and integrity. If you're willing to partner with us, I can promise real change. Lisa's gaze narrowed. Partner with you. That sounds like a convenient way to silence me. No. Mark's voice cracked with genuine emotion. I'm serious. I want you to help us rebuild. We need someone with your insight and passion. Help us make Brentwick National Bank what it should be. I'll give you full access to our policies, training programs, and even our financial records, if that's what it takes to earn your trust. The offer hung in the air, thick with desperation and a glimmer of hope. Lisa let the silence stretch, her mind racing through the implications. Why should I believe you? She asked finally. Because you have the power to expose us, Mark admitted. And if we fail to follow through, I know you won't hesitate to tear us apart. Lisa had to admit, the man was right. Her reputation, her connections, her influence, it all gave her the leverage she needed. But this wasn't about ego. It was about doing the right thing. I'll consider it, she said, her voice measured. But there will be conditions, non-negotiable ones. Name them. I want an official public acknowledgement of what happened to me. Not just some carefully worded PR statement, but a real apology. And I want my attorneys involved in the policy reviews to ensure nothing gets swept under the rug. Lastly, I want a seat at the table when it comes to implementing these changes. If I'm going to put my name behind this, I need to be certain it's more than empty promises. Mark nodded slowly. You'll have it. All of it. Good. Lisa glanced around the office, her gaze lingering on the elegant decor meant to project power and authority. I'll be watching every move you make, and if I see even the slightest hint of insincerity, I will burn everything you've built to the ground. Do you understand? Mark swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. Perfectly. Then we have a deal. For now. Without waiting for his response, Lisa turned on her heel and left the office, her stride strong and unyielding. Her phone buzzed as soon as she stepped into the elevator. A text from Rachel. How'd it go? Lisa typed her response with a smirk on her lips. They're shaking, and it's only just begun. In the weeks that followed, Lisa dove headfirst into the overhaul of Brentwick National Bank's discriminatory practices. It wasn't enough to sit on the sidelines and trust that they would honor their promises. She made sure her presence was felt, her voice unignorable. And Mark Caldwell, to his credit, kept his word. At least he tried to. Lisa's legal team tore through the bank's policies like sharks scenting blood. They scrutinized hiring practices, employee training protocols, customer service policies, and the alarming number of discrimination complaints that had been conveniently buried in corporate red tape. The deeper Lisa's team dug, the more she realized how systemic the problem was. It wasn't just one teller with a bias. It was an entire culture built on subtle, coded language that allowed discrimination to thrive under the guise of professionalism. And Lisa was determined to dismantle every rotten piece of it. Her demands were extensive. First, she required a public apology, not just for her personal experience, but for the systemic discrimination that Brentwick National Bank had allowed to fester. To Lisa's surprise, Mark Caldwell didn't fight her on that. Within days, the official apology was released, signed by Mark himself, and broadcast across multiple media outlets. It was a calculated move, but Lisa appreciated the gesture nonetheless. She knew it wasn't repentance so much as damage control, but if the end result was real change, then she could live with that. The real battle began when her legal team sat down with the bank's executives to begin drafting new policies. Lisa was relentless. Every suggestion she made was backed by research, statistics, and testimonies from people who had been wronged by the system. "What you're proposing will be incredibly expensive," one executive protested during the heated meeting. "And your current practices are already costing you millions in lost business, lawsuits, and tarnished reputation." Lisa shot back. "You can either invest in real change or keep throwing money at lawyers to defend the indefensible. Your choice." Mark Caldwell watched her with a mix of awe and terror. Lisa could see the conflict in his eyes. Part of him wanted to argue, to protect the status quo that had made him rich and powerful. But there was another part, one that genuinely seemed to want to make things right. As the weeks turned into months, Lisa's influence over the bank grew. Not because she held an official title, but because her relentless pursuit of justice left no room for compromise. Employees were retrained. Hiring practices were overhauled. New safeguards were put in place to ensure fairness and equality at every level of customer interaction. Lisa attended meetings at all hours, her drive fueled by something deeper than mere professional ambition. She was fighting for something she had rarely seen in the corporate world, real accountability. And she refused to back down. One day, as she prepared for yet another round of negotiations, her phone rang. It was Rachel. "You've gone viral," Rachel said, her voice trembling with excitement. "What are you talking about?" Lisa asked, already scanning her laptop for news updates. "Your press conference from last week. It's everywhere. People are calling you the CEO who made a bank kneel, and they're loving it. You've become a symbol of corporate accountability." Lisa's fingers paused over her keyboard. The press conference had been an impromptu affair, just her speaking candidly to reporters about her experiences and the changes she was demanding. She hadn't planned for it to become a phenomenon. But the internet had its own mind. Clips of her fiery speech were circulating across every platform, with captions like, "How to Make Corporate America Listen," and "One Woman's War Against Discrimination." "I didn't do this for popularity," Lisa muttered, her tone more conflicted than she intended. "I know," Rachel said gently, "but people are hungry for stories like yours. Stories where the bad guys are held accountable, where the underdog doesn't just survive but triumphs." Lisa leaned back in her chair, her gaze distant. She had come here to fight for herself, but it had become so much more than that. People she didn't even know were looking to her as a beacon of hope, as proof that change was possible. "Lisa," Rachel continued, her voice thick with emotion, "you've done something incredible, and I know you're going to keep doing it." Lisa exhaled slowly. "This isn't over, Rachel. Not until Brentwick is truly transformed. But maybe, just maybe, we're on the right path." The next meeting with Mark Caldwell was different. Gone was the nervous executive trying to appease a furious client. In his place was a man who looked like he hadn't slept in days, but had finally grasped the magnitude of what needed to be done. "Lisa," he began, his voice rough with fatigue, "I want to thank you. Not for making this easy, because you haven't, but for making me see just how deep the rot went. I've been part of the problem. I know that now. but I want to be part of the solution. Lisa studied him for a long moment, searching for any sign of deception. But all she saw was a man who had been broken down and rebuilt by the fire of accountability. "Then let's get to work," she said. Their collaboration continued, the process grueling but effective. Over the next several months, Lisa's oversight ensured that every promise was kept. The bank's culture began to shift, slowly but undeniably. The press continued to follow her journey, turning her into something of a legend. But Lisa cared little for the fame. Her satisfaction came from the testimonials pouring in from people who felt seen, heard, and respected for the first time. The day the newly implemented policies were officially enacted, Lisa allowed herself a rare moment of peace. She had won, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. As Lisa stood in front of her office window, gazing out at the city below, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Mark Caldwell. "We did it, and we couldn't have done it without you." Lisa's fingers hovered over the keyboard before she replied. "No, you did it because you finally listened."